Great to be here as part of the Retail Summit today. We're going to do a few different things. First, we'll do a little bit more detailed introductions of Mark and Mike. The second, as part of preparation for the summit, a number of you would have received and then participated in a survey, a piece of research around personalization and what's taking place. So I wanted to share those results with you today, share a few more thoughts on personalization, and then turn it over to our panelists to answer some questions. So that's our plan. So with that, first, Mark, why don't you introduce yourself and a little bit about AAFES and what it is, and then we'll turn it over to Mike and then dive in.
Great. First of all, it's a privilege to be here, and I appreciate the invite from Amrit. The Army Air Force Exchange, unless you have been part of the military or a military brat, we're kind of the unknown retailer. We're about an $8 to $9 billion retailer that serves the military throughout the world. We have a very diverse capability of providing different services from a retail perspective to the military. Everything from a main store, which would have everything from clothing and apparel, appliances, electronics, and on and on. We also have a C-store and gasoline that we provide. We have a mall area where we provide services with outside vendors that come in and actually have different stores in that mall area on a base or an installation. We also run all the fast food on an Army and Air Force installation. So we're a very diverse organization with a customer base that is very near and dear to our hearts. About 85% of our associates have some tie to the military. Either they were in the military, their family was in the military, or they have a relative in the military. So there's definitely that understanding of servicing that customer in a way that's different. I would venture a guess that I would tell you that if you could replicate the way we care about our customer with your customer, you would be way better in that customer service than you would ever expect to be because of that tie we have with the military and what they do. The other thing that we do is that part of our mandate is that we actually go where they go. So if they go to Afghanistan and Iraq to war, we go with them. We actually have stores today in those two countries. We have Burger Kings, we have other fast food establishments there that we run and operate for the military to make their lives a little bit better while they're in those war areas. And so it's a very important thing that we do. One of the things I will leave you with is that we are not tax supported. We are for profit, but our profits or our revenues go back to the military to provide for their morale, welfare, and recreation programs, or the quality of service items on a base or installation. So last year, we gave back almost $300 million to the military.
Hi, I'm Michael Cooper. I'm with Michaels Stores. I've been with Michaels for a little bit over 2 years now, and really interesting journey that Michaels is on. We really have tried to understand who our customer is and how do we evolve that space. So you look at arts and craft business, there's a lot of parts to it, right? So a lot of different ways you can use glue and glitter. And one of the things as we had a chance to talk to our customers, what we found is there are some customers that we kind of coin into this more of enthusiast, very, very much of an expert type crafter. They're really out there. They have a comfort level in terms of crafting. They have the know-how. They have the time. It's one of their primary hobbies. And they enjoy what they make and as well as the final outcome of the craft that they put together. But we also notice there's a huge untapped potential here with this novice, this less experienced crafter. And really some of the barriers that we had noticed is her ability to, or at least comfort in terms of how to pull together a craft. You know, they're a little bit more of a fear of failure. And the time, a lot of competing priorities and what needs to get done. And in terms of the outcome, she was a little bit more interested in the final product versus necessarily the journey going through it. And so as you look at kind of this high-level segmentation, that's really kind of defining some of the journey as we look at different customers and a lot of sub-segments beyond that. But as we ultimately try to identify this path, We've done a lot of things of understanding the high-level view of the customer, what the customer's mission is in terms of each trip that she comes in, as well as what activities, what engagement points does she really have, and how would we really engage her. So that's been really fun, and we've been having a great time with NectarOM and some other partners to try to evolve our capabilities as well. Look forward to talking more.
Appreciate it, Mike and Mark. So very quickly about NectarOM, and then we'll dive into the results of the survey itself, and then turn it into more of a discussion. We're in the omni-channel personalization space. The whole objective is to make it easy to build, operate, and scale that capability. And the way we do that is really threefold. The first is bring data together into one place for that single view. Number two, score it to figure out next best action or next best offer. And then the third is syndicate that content to every channel that's available, whether it's digital or traditional. The benefits of personalization, and I think this topic has been covered and touched on throughout the day as well, highly measurable, right? So that's one of the big benefits I think it brings to retailers and brands. And then the suite really does those three things I described. So bring together data, scores, and then syndicate and activate. The things that we really believe in and kind of from a value perspective and why NectarOM, rapid test and learn, the ability to do campaigns quickly, the ability to deploy quickly, build those lists, realize the full value of the tech that you may already have. So if you've already deployed Salesforce or Experian or another solution set, how to sit around that and make that investment much more effective. Full ownership, not a black box approach. And then finally, that closed loop measurement and reporting. So with that, the results of the survey itself. And so part of why we wanted to start this session today with this particular perspective, it seems like there's a lot of myths about personalization. And as we were speaking with the leadership at Maze, they started to ask the question, well, how do we know where our audience is on the journey of personalization? And so that's why this survey was put together. And so what we figured out through that survey with your help, here's what customers are looking for. So 83% of customers want personalization. They want some ability for a brand to say, show me what's relevant for me today at this moment. But only a third of them really believe that you in the room, because this is information and data from you, that only a third of you in the room are actually doing this well. At the same time, you're feeling that need, and 30% of retailers believe that it's a top priority. 70% of the group in here feels that we're at a medium or a high level of data-driven maturity, and so that's pretty important. Half of the group, when you bring it together, feels that personalization is a major priority. And if you add the two, the top five, the top three, it's almost 80%. So very much a top-of-mind topic. And then one of the questions was, well, why are you doing personalization? And this was interesting, right? So typically you might think, well, let's boost revenues. Let's try to keep up with competition. But the number one answer was really much more about the customer. What is the customer looking for, and how do I help meet that customer's needs, I think, as Mark and Mike were starting to point out. The stage of where you are in personalization, 70% are either in that proof of concept mode, or it's on the horizon over the course of the next number of months. So it's coming up pretty quickly. The benefits of personalization have been highlighted as well, so it's about attributable revenue. So I won't go into a lot of detail there. But one of the key points, and this is going to start being thought starters as well for Mike and Mark and the group here, how do we really reduce cycle time, particularly when we think about data-driven marketing? It's the intersection of the teams working together with technology. And so how do we really reduce that time to market and accelerate? Part of the thought process around it are these 6 core ideas to try and experiment and take away. So first, starting with data, how do you democratize data? How do you make data available to every team member, to every function in a consistent manner? The second, when you start deciding what to do, how do you actually bring vendor funding into the mix? Because typically for a lot of retailers, that's actually an area of profit, right, that potentially shows up. Think about journeys. I think some of the panelists and discussions earlier covered that. Break down the walls between the team. Let's be specific, and let's scale. So to dive into these pretty quickly, create that single view, and let's do it quickly. It may not be perfect. Let's figure out what the customer wants to buy, how are they engaging, what do they want. Bring those pieces together first as fast as possible, and then start to augment and build a data layer over time, right? And I think Mark and Mike will start to highlight some of that as well. If we do that, we're able to make decisions faster, put data into the hands of the team members that need it to make a decision, to gain an insight, et cetera. And then on this point of vendor funding, it's been interesting working with retailers and having the conversations, particularly where personalization is often thought of as a very marketing-centric function, and it really is. But when we start to bring the vendors into the mix, a lot of those vendors are seeking to reach your audience. And so there's a really interesting way to bring the merchant teams into the process as well. And vendor funding is a way to potentially do that. So how do we start to potentially apply this idea of paid and social media, or so third-party channels, to personalization where content's coming into email or on the website, in direct mail, and funding those in a kind of a competitive bid process. A quick win to highlight, particularly for retailers that are investing in FSIs and circulars and that entire process. Those FSIs are a rich area of content to bring into those other channels. Bringing those offers, bringing imagery, bringing content into email, into the mobile app, into the website becomes another really closed loop way to bring that data in. Think in journeys. I'll cover this super quickly. As we start to look at the customer, where are the places that they're engaging and how are they engaging? So whether a journey is really around replenishment or a journey is around deal seeking, so if a customer is interested in a product and you can identify that and the price drops, put a notification in front of that customer to try to drive or spur activity. Loyalty programs, how are you using promotional newsletters to highlight some of the programming activity? On-site widgets or online ordering and driving those capabilities, and call center and geo-targeting and such. But personalization, when we start to think about omni-channel, is about more than digital. Often I think we get caught up in saying personalization, it's fundamentally about the website, it's about a mobile app, it's email, but we can start to also think about how does personalization impact, or how can that feed into direct mail? Triggered direct mail, at least when you start talking to some retailers, is a really interesting behavioral characteristic to say, given what a customer did on the website, how do I get a piece of print into their home highlighting the categories in which they're engaging with? Right? Break down the walls. So it's something that we hear a fair amount about. In order to get down that journey of personalization, it requires a lot of folks to work together. Sometimes we don't think about legal and risk, but they're involved in the discussion around PII and identifiable information and what can we do with it. But we also have user experience and copywriters and data analytics and such. For most of the organizations out there, they're pretty siloed. So one approach that we've seen that works pretty nicely, and it's borrowing something from the tech teams that you're working with, is introducing a role like a scrum master or a lead or a project manager that's really working cross-functionally across all of those different touch points to say, well, what else do we bring along into the conversation, and how have we made sure that all of those different team members are really engaging? Let's be specific and relevant from a customer perspective. So it's who is she? How is she engaging? Where is she shopping? What is she buying? And bringing those data sets into the mix as well. Another quick win where there's often a situation when we look at seasonal businesses, or even if it's not seasonal, time of year, and this is now collaborating with the merchant teams, situations where you have overstock items, specific stores or distribution centers use targeted marketing and personalization to drive people into the store given the preferences that they have. So if you know you're overstocked on red T-shirts in a particular location, through personalization, we can identify the individuals that would be interested in those red T-shirts at that location, and we put that stimulus in front of them. Reduce markdowns, increase profitability as a result of it. Another quick win, when you have a customer showing up in the database, first time, we can drive that first time purchase, but how do we now drive repeat or reorder, particularly in situations that are high profit margin and replenishment driven? Stimulate reactivation, so again, this idea of replenishment, geolocate, how to use information and know where a customer is and what they're doing to then drive a particular offer associated with them. Finally, the sixth essential, let's figure out what's working, rapid test and learn, and let's scale those opportunities as fast as possible. I'll leave it there, but we're going to turn it over to the panel now with Mark and Mike. You shared a little bit about your companies and your backgrounds, maybe starting with Mark first. Particularly over the last year, and maybe coming up in the near future, an initiative that the Exchange is particularly proud about, and that's been interesting when you start to think about using customer data to drive an experience.
So I'm going to share two things that we're doing that has been successful. First of all, and I'll give a plug to NectarOM here. NectarOM, unfortunately for them, was our entry point really into personalization. And they got to go through some of our growing pains with us. But where we really focused on at the beginning was really dynamic email content and delivery to individuals that had a propensity to purchase those items. And it worked very, very well. As some items that you need to look at, one of the things that we found very, very quickly is that we had a couple problems in that. One is that our creative teams were not organized to support dynamic personalization information. So we were still in the business of building pretty emails rather than providing content that could be easily transferred from one email to another from a personalization perspective that's organized the same way, and so that it can be mechanized and that you don't have to touch them all. And that was a very big learning for us, is that we had to change the way our teams worked. The other area that we had to really focus on was changing the culture of our organization to trust the data. Everybody says they trust data until it's time to send it using data or to touch your customer when you're using the data. Then people start to say, oh, I don't know if we should do it exactly that way. Let's change this, let's change this, let's change this. And then before you know it, the data isn't driving the decisions. And therefore, you're starting to go back to that gut feel type of approach, or what we've always done type of approach. The other success that we've done this year is one of the differences that we have with our customer is that, unfortunately or fortunately, whatever way you look at it, we only have 12 million of them. We can't get more. Unless they build up the military more, we don't get them, right? So once they are in the military, that is our customer base, and they can retire, and a long-term retiree can stay with us, but we have a limited customer base. So it's not like we can go out and get the customer once and then replace them with another customer later and replace that customer because we have a limited amount. So we have to drive personalization. One of the things that we've been doing for 40 years probably, we've been in existence for 120, by the way. But for 40 years, we probably sent a weekly tabloid to the same person every week for 40 years. Unless they tell us to stop, we keep sending it. Well, we've really used propensity scores to really start to determine who we send those tabloids to, what content should be in those for those customers, and that has saved a ton of money, and at the same time, we're increasing our performance.
You know, Mark and I had a little bit of an opportunity to catch up before this panel discussion, and it's interesting. I'm sure all of us, to some extent, share a lot of the same hurdles as it comes back to personalization. I'll tell you about my personal journey at Micheals, and you know, part of the reason I came in is, you know, from Micheals, it was really, you know, we didn't have the problem in terms of trying to get the most senior leadership sponsorship around personalization. That was already bought in, right? I think that's absolutely critical, but that was already bought in at Micheals, and big reason I decided to join the company. One of the things that became very apparent, though, when I walked in is there. I kind of broke it into three big things that I wanted to get done. And one was, what are the things I could do that were just very simple that Micheals wasn't already doing? Because you have to start somewhere. And I wasn't looking for perfection. I was really just looking for effectiveness. What's going to drive some sales? What's going to be more relevant to this customer? How does it feel like I'm taking a step more towards sharing information that's more relevant to her and through the vehicles that's most interesting for her to receive that information? So there were some things as simple as even cart abandonment, browse abandonment that we weren't doing. Some things around welcome series that we weren't doing. Things about win back or birthday, different offers for around the birthday. Those were fairly simple, quick win opportunities. There were things through direct mail that, as we looked at the file we had a pretty robust direct mail file, but we weren't mailing to that audience as much. Now, not necessarily our preferred means to talk to a customer. It's fairly expensive, but at the same time, in some ways, if you don't have the scale or the reach through some of your other digital channels, it's certainly relevant that. So trying to personalize those direct mail pieces based off of that customer's historical purchase behavior. So really kind of step one is, what are the quick win opportunities? Kind of bucket number two was, I've got to create scale, especially in my digital file. And so one of the things that we talked about is Micheals is a fairly, it's a $5 billion retailer, but a lot of the check averages is lower than maybe some of the other retailers. And we don't have a private label or a co-branded credit card, so that wasn't a mechanism for us to capture some of that behavior. We had launched a site, relatively late for most, and so we had a lot of clickstream data coming in that regard. We did a pretty good job in our stores of asking for email addresses, so we had a nice size email database. But there wasn't a great mechanism. So one of the things that we quickly looked at is, how do I pull together a loyalty program that helps me elevate what that experience is for the customer? And that was really kind of the center point of it. And it was twofold. Is the way I can elevate is to know more about her. What's really she interested in? What are the crafts she's interested in? Why she's doing it? The cadence, her expertise. And then also providing her benefits for being part of that loyalty program. And what we found is, customers are certainly willing to share data if they're getting something in return. And so we launched that loyalty program July last year. We're still north of, actually we just passed the 20 million member mark last month. So a lot of momentum in terms of capturing enrollment and the expectations of those customers to get something in return. So that was really kind of a foundation. Through the loyalty program, you sign up with a email address and a phone number. You're opting into emails. You can always unsubscribe, but we don't find that to be the case. But that gave us a lot of scale, ability to talk to a lot more customers than we could before. And it allows us to shorten the things as newspaper circulars. We know we lock those in several weeks out. Literally, story this morning was, we made a decision that we wanted to elevate a coupon for a rewards member for this afternoon. We made that decision, we turned it on, and it was out within an hour. And so reaching several million customers, trying to get them to come in tonight and over the next couple of days with a special coupon. So creating scale was another big thing for us. The last part, and to be fair, we're still on this journey. It's more about who are our partners and what's the long-term capabilities as you kind of break down people, process, and technology. But you need to have great partners, you need to have great people, and you need to have the processes that work. And I think Amrit hit upon a couple of those in his conversation. But that's the journey we're on right now, and we've certainly made some steps, but there's more to go.
Let's talk a little bit about the softer side of personalization. So certainly it requires data, it requires technology, people, process, etc. But the theme of this particular topic is also about personalization, winning the hearts of your customers. So Mark, maybe with you, how are you using personalization and data-driven marketing to tie in to win the hearts of that customer?
Well, you're hitting on the absolute key item that is really why you're doing personalization in the first place. We have an interesting dynamic with our customer in that when you've bought a Snickers bar in Afghanistan, you like us. You wouldn't think it would have that much impact, but when you're able to get the goods and services overseas that you would like to have, even though you're not at home, they truly appreciate that. So whenever they go overseas, we get loyal customers very, very quickly. But when they come home is the challenge, right? Now they're in the regular marketplace. There's a lot of competition. How do we become more relevant to them? How do they understand that we're there to serve them? We have the right prices, the right products, and so forth to help them with what they need and what they want. So really, when we look at personalization, that is the key area that we're really focusing on. Is not just we want to be part of their lifestyle. We have certain areas that we've learned very quickly have a great impact with our customer, which you can guess. Tactical gear, they love it, right? And so we have to drive it to the right people, the younger soldier. But one of the problems that we do have is that we're not talking to the younger soldier. When you start talking about email and direct mail, which I talked about before, those aren't, the young soldier, the 18 to 25-year-old, it doesn't want those. Right? They want it on an app or on their phone. They want it through social media. They want it through other delivery mechanisms, but they don't want it on email, and they don't want direct mail to their barrack, right? So we have to find new ways, and we're really in a very beginning stage of understanding how to drive that personalization for the younger soldier. Now, we've got a great opportunity right now that the Department of Defense has recently let us now offer online shopping to all veterans, which we're very, very proud and very, very excited about, which doubles our customer base. We know who they are, but now we have to go and create another personalization, and you wouldn't believe the age group. One of the things that we have to do is we have to verify these customers. And so they come in, they provide their information. If they have difficulties, you cannot imagine how many 90-year-old veterans that I've talked to over the last few months that are just trying to get the shopping benefit. So if we've attracted them to come in and verify, what are we doing now to serve them, and how are we going to serve them in the future to actually talk to them individually, recognize who they are. One of our, it's not a competitor, but one of the people that we feel that does an excellent job in the military community is one of the largest life insurance and insurance providers that you see advertised all the time. And they actually answer the phone, captain or sergeant. We do the same thing. So it's about really talking to them as individuals, not just as a mass customer.
Mike, same question for you. How are you winning the hearts of that customer?
I think when it comes back to the hearts, as we think really kind of central, Micheals, holistically, a customer doesn't need to shop at Micheals. I mean, it's more of a hobby place. It's not like you have to go to Micheals because you have to get food or anything of that nature. What it really is, it becomes a hobby, and it's elevating those things. Now, there's different parts of the Micheals business, and I think in those different parts of the business, we've tried to leverage our personalization in different ways. So one of the areas that tends to be a little bit more connected with the customer is custom framing. So it tends to be a little bit more expensive of a purchase than most other purchases at Micheals. It's typically something that's very meaningful to that customer in terms of whether it's a framed picture from a wedding or a special moment with their family, something very sentimental. We get a lot of things actually with the military as well. And often from that regard, we're trying to make sure that we're connected throughout that entire customer journey, and so we're trying to pick up all the signals. And one of the things that we've tried to tie into, we have a system that when a customer comes into our in-store environment and gets a quote, one of the things it does, it takes a picture of the image that they're trying to quote, and it puts different frames and different mats around that, so the customer kind of has a point of view as to what's that's going to look like. And so one of the things that we have tried from personalization, and we're still trying to get at scale, is how do we take that data feed it into a way that is manageable. And so as a follow-up, if the customer doesn't transact through that specific purchase, that we have an ability to connect and follow up and understand from that entire customer's journey, not only for that one, but their entire life cycle with Micheals, what's going to really help them kind of get what they want in terms of custom framing at a value that's really important to them. So, I think from the capacity of how do you take these really critical experiences and continue to elevate it when that customer even moves beyond just a store. So through our digital properties, our emails, and the different ways we target them. So I think that's one capacity that we absolutely do it.
Next one from Mike also. So when most of the audience in here, just based on the survey results, are relatively either earlier on in that personalization journey, or maybe in a mode of implementing a proof of concept and test and learn and such. Two-part question. If you had to start that journey all over again, what would you do differently? And so continuing with that, a couple lessons you could share that says, watch out.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of different things that I'm sure we all consider when it comes back to personalization. One of my challenges is, where do I start? And to be fair, it's not just you walk in the office and everything that you're looking at is kind of anchored. The organization, the capabilities are sometimes legacy. Not everything that you have is really kind of set up for it. And then you also have to determine, how big an opportunity it is. Not everything should be personalized, and I know that's counterintuitive, but, we think that there's a really important role for multiple vehicles in our business, but when it comes back to a specific customer journey, we're trying to look at all the signals that a customer has. So what are they browsing? What's the clickstream data on the website? What are they doing in store? How are they engaging with our app? How are they engaging with emails? All those signals that customer gives us, that's really shaping it. And when you have so many signals, you say, okay, well, which one do I pick? Which one's the most valuable journey? And so for me, the big thing has been prioritization. What are the things, as I kind of look at the map of what other retailers have found successful? And I think it's very important. I've reached out to a lot of my peers out there and said, what's working in your business? What have you found, non-competitive businesses that really works? And I put those on my roadmap. I talk to the consulting groups that come in and say, you could do this, this, and this. And I go through that map and say, some of these really make sense for Michael's organization, some of them don't. But at the end of the day, it's prioritization, trying to identify the things that we feel like we can execute with the capabilities. The other thing is, if I had to start from scratch, yes, it would be nice to have a different technology stack. It would be nice to have, potentially, a dual organization, one that can kind of handle the day-to-day business dynamics, but also some that are directly focused. And what we found is we have to kind of do that. And that's one of the areas that we've partnered with NectarOM and in other groups, is that they have the capacity to kind of come in, take our vision and bring it to life. And so I think that's been key. And then across the balance of the tech stack, that's something we always look at, is how do I get a platform across all these critical things that's going to be able to tie, that's going to stitch all the data together, that's going to be able to process the data and be able for us to identify critical journeys, and then whether that customer is on the website or out there on the open web or wherever it may be, that she's going to have a very similar experience from the communication that comes from Micheals. And so those have been the efforts, and that last portion is the journey we're really on.
Similar question for you, Mark. Any thoughts on if you had to do it all over again, what you would do differently?
There's a lot of things. You learn as you go. I'm going to kind of reiterate a few things that Mike said. We had corporate buy-in. We had leadership buy-in. They felt strongly about it. We knew we needed to go there. And this is almost one of those things you're kind of embarrassed to say, but one of the things I identified pretty early on, but I wish I had done it even earlier, was that we needed to pull together a true living strategy on what we were going to attack first, what we were going to attack second, and so on, to give us some order. We have a tendency a little bit to run a little haphazard. Hey, let's do this. We can do this. Let's do this. We can do that. And before you know it, you're supporting a lot of different items, but you haven't really gotten to the points that maybe you should be focusing on that are more important or that are going to have really more impact. And so putting order to it, I think, is very, very, very needed. And so if I was going to do something over again, I would have really gone out to sell the strategy. The other thing we had a challenge with was that we were building a data science team at the same time we were trying to start doing things. And that data science team is critical to our success, but we were short on resources from day one. And so we were constantly trying to play catch up. Now they're starting to see the value of what the data science and the propensity modeling and all these things can do for the business. And now the requests are coming in like crazy. And so now we really need that prioritization. So those were the couple of things I would really do over, is I would get that team built, but I would also really put around we all know that we live in a world that the strategy has to be able to change and evolve. But I would have still worked that much earlier and really sold that strategy in the organization much earlier in the process.
With the few minutes that we have left, there are students in the room as well from the Mays Business School. Thinking about personalization and data-driven marketing, what specific skill set could you say to them that as they're starting their career, that would be super important to hone in on?
Yeah, I think I landed here kind of answered by accident a little bit. It's, I grew up in a consulting world, and what I loved about consulting is you had an opportunity to work with many different, I mainly worked in retail, but many different retailers on a number of different problems. And, the one thing that consulting kind of does for you is it gives you the opportunity to just throw into a problem and invest and try to figure out what are the kind of the critical levers and where's the value opportunity and how do you unlock it. And that kind of evolved into different roles throughout my career, and certainly going more and more into marketing. And I think why I say that is one of the things that I've been able to lean on is personalization and how people define it. You have to define it for your organization and your customers. But it's moving so fast. There's a lot of shiny objects. Don't get distracted by the shiny objects. I mean, that is probably the biggest problem that I see out there in the world. It's just too much. You just can't handle it. But the other thing is to be agile, be nimble, test quickly, understand what's understand what doesn't work. Don't get so enamored by one idea. Keep on moving on and on and on. And don't try to have the perfect solution. Try to have a good solution. Try to drive value. And that's really what's critical.
Same question for you, Mark. Any advice to the youngsters and the young at heart?
First of all, I agree with everything Mike said. Great advice. So I'll throw out a couple of other different things. One, understand the financials of a company. Really drive yourself to understand the impact of what you do and how it affects the company and how it affects the bottom line. You really need to understand the financials of a business. The second thing is have passion. Get in there, get your hands dirty. Learn everything you can about the customer and really have that passion towards what you're doing. Make it an expertise of yours. You do those things and you're really going to drive value to the business that you work with.
Yeah, absolutely agree with the statement of understanding. And one of the things I ask often of the team and my team, and as those who come in for interviews, is Micheals is a public company. There's enough information out there to understand what our business is, and it really does drive me crazy if I'm interviewing somebody certainly more senior and they don't even know the volume of Micheals or some of the number of customers we have when we're sharing that information publicly. That I think is absolutely critical, and the reason that comes back to is my point on prioritization. If you don't understand those things, how do you know what's important or not? And not everything's just pure financial. I mean, some of it's qualitative improvements from personalization, but at least be able to articulate in that terms as well.
And with that, I think I see Cindy looking at me in terms of the time, in terms of where we are. Want to say thank you to Mark, and also thank you to Mike and everyone here for listening in to us, and happy to answer any questions independently after this, but appreciate your help. Have a great day.